Hello and welcome to the Lewiston Tribune Podcast. This is episode number 57. I'm Matt Bainey, managing editor of the Tribune, and I'm joined today by Eric Barker, the Tribune's outdoor and environmental editor. Eric, how you doing?
Doing pretty good, Matt. Yourself?
Oh, good. Good. Today we're going to talk about the latest in the salmon and dams debate. Before we get started, just a reminder that the Lewiston Tribune Podcast is available at our website and on our YouTube channel. And be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. So, Eric, where are we now with the salmon and dams debate?
Well, that's the big question. You might say the billion-dollar question. The short answer is we are back in court. The long answer, I would say it's a little bit more foggy than that. You know, from the point of view of salmon advocates who see the sort of the best solution as removing the Snake River dams, breaching the lower Snake River dams, they suffered a pretty significant setback in November with the election of Donald Trump over Harris.
What legal filing was made this week in the salmon and dams debate?
Well, so the state of Oregon and some conservation and fishing groups filed what amounts to a preliminary injunction. Essentially, they are arguing that wild Snake River salmon are in such bad shape that the judge in this case, Michael Simon of Portland, should order the federal government to take some special protective measures while this case plays out. And so what that kind of amounts to is more spill at Snake and Columbia River dams during the juvenile fish migration period, 24 hours, 7 days a week during the summer, and then increased spill at other times a year. And then also some lower elevations, what they call minimum operating pool at a lot of the reservoirs. Now that's the sort of the minimum elevation where the dam can still do its main functions, which is produce hydropower and provide for transportation. They basically argue that, the fish are in really bad shape and these are needed. Now, the folks on the other side will have some time to respond to this filing, but in news releases, they said basically that, boy, those are drastic. They will really hamper power generation and raise rates for everybody. You all should negotiate. We should come, all sit down at a table and come up with an agreement instead of being in court.
Well, and this matter had been in court for decades. Briefly was not in court.
Right.
So I guess kind of tell us where we're at on that whole scale.
So the short answer is we are back in court, as you said. How far this issue shifts because of the election of Donald Trump, we're not sure. But there had been a pause in litigation. The plaintiffs in this case, which were Columbia River Indian tribes like the Nez Perce, environmental groups, fishing groups, had reached an agreement with the Biden administration that paused this litigation. Dates back to about 1993, the litigation does. And for exchange of some studies that would look at sort of how you would replace the services of the Snake River dams if they were to be breached in the future. And the agreement also provided about estimated $1 billion in funding for salmon recovery and for some renewable energy development by the tribes. So Trump torpedoed that, which sort of made a lawsuit that was already in play live again. So he just kind of hit the ground running. That lawsuit that was paused, toward the end of the Biden administration is now going, and the first move in that was asking for these preliminary injunctions.
Okay.
More long term, we don't know how far of a setback this is. From the perspective of salmon advocates, they've made a fair amount, probably a remarkable amount of progress in the last few years. For decades, there's been a fight in the region over how best to save Wild Snake River and Columbia River salmon and steelhead that is mostly revolved around fish advocates trying to convince federal agencies that the dams needed to be breached and to have them recommend to Congress that the dams be breached. Well, a few years ago, if you'll remember, Representative Mike Simpson of Idaho said, hey, we should breach the dams. And he came up with this $33.5 billion plan to do so. That sort of elevated the argument to a much higher level than it had been. Simpson never introduced legislation to do it, but still it sort of lifted the debate to Congress. And then when Joe Biden was elected, his administration was much more receptive to the argument by the tribes and the fishing groups. Now, Biden never endorsed breaching, but the agreement that we'll talk a little bit about later was largely seen as a necessary pathway, some steps that would get you further down the road towards breaching. So now that Trump is in office, he killed that plan. Where we settle out, how far of a step back, we're not quite sure yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, let's talk about the Biden agreement that had been in place for about 2 years. Was that about the length of it?
Gosh, I am not. About 2 years, we'll say. It might be a little less than that.
And yes, it was a pause on all litigation on this matter, and I guess hopefully every side would talk it out and there'd come to some sort of resolution. Now, of course, that's like you say, that's off the table. It's been canceled. Mm-hmm. If that agreement had been left in place, and I'm asking you to speculate now a little bit, what might have come out of that?
Well, so the big things were, so when Simpson introduced his plan, for a brief moment, it looked like maybe breaching could happen pretty quickly. And then it became clear that there's a lot of things that have to happen before you breach the dams. You have to figure out a way to replace the power. You have to figure out a way for farmers to get their crops to market. You have to figure out a way for the farmers around the Tri-Cities who use irrigation drawn from the Snake River. How are they going to get their crops watered? And all those things are really pretty tricky. They're not easy to do. And so that's what part of what this agreement does, is it set up studies to try to figure out exactly how to do that. So I think those would have moved forward. The agreement also, made a lot of assistance available to the tribes to develop renewable energy, like solar power, wind power, and they were able to sort of bank that power. I mean, it would go to the grid, but they were able to, however many megawatts they generated, they're able to sort of hold that in an accounting way aside and count it towards replacing power of the lower Snake River dams. So that very well could have happened. The agreement was seen sort of as a pathway or a step towards breaching, but the way I look at it, there was still a long, long ways to go. I mean, to put these renewable power pieces in place and actually generate enough power to replace that which is generated at the dams would take quite a long time. And also, new transportation systems. So there was still a significant amount of ground to cover, but it was a step in the direction.
I remember the Simpson proposal. We've talked about that, and it. I don't remember if it was really specific, but I think what it was proposing, it had some of the same. It addressed some of the same questions. What do you do about transportation? What do you do about power? And indeed,
it devoted a lot of money to it. Yeah,
$33 billion,
and also it had a lot of money that would help communities and industries that would suffer because of dam breaching. I mean, it called for, sort of a wing of the Pacific National Laboratory to be located here in Lewiston-Clarkston Valley that would concentrate on battery storage. So presumably that would bring in jobs. And had a lot of assistance for other entities that would be harmed.
And so, there seemed to be at least the Biden agreement. At least it seemed like there was sort of something new happening. You kind of talked about it. It's hard to say what's going to happen now, but it does sort of feel like now that this is back in the courts that it's just going to maybe be mired in legal proceedings for decades like it had been before, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's always sort of a fool's errand to predict the outcome of a court case, but in this instance we do have the benefit of history. I think this is the 6th iteration of the same group of plaintiffs suing the federal government for not doing enough in their dam operation plans to help the fish that are harmed by operation of the dams. So Judge Simon, his predecessor, Judge Redden, have been really skeptical of the federal government's biological opinions and dam operation plan. This 2020 plan is not significantly different, so one might predict that Judge Simon will be skeptical of it and may again rule in favor of the salmon advocates. As they like to say sometimes, or maybe they don't like to say it, they say, we have a great history of winning in court but losing in the river. That means they win these cases, but they don't really have anything to show for it. They clearly want to breach the dams, and the judges have only said that this plan is no good, go back and do it again. So perhaps that's where we're going again, is another remand.
Well, I found it interesting that the dam backers in your story said, no, why are you taking this to the courts? We need to talk about this, but that seemed to be where we had been. Now, they'll say that that's not quite a fair sum up of it, since
that's right.
They weren't in favor of the Biden pause. They thought that, at least some people thought that was done in secret, and maybe they didn't have as much of a seat at the table as they would have liked.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly their argument, is the agreement was between the tribes and the fishing groups and the Biden administration, and they were outside of the room and didn't have a say and were expected to agree to it, after it was all said and done, and they didn't. And so yeah, now, I don't think anybody wants to be back in court. There's a certain amount of uncertainty being in court, and it's expensive. So they're calling for everybody to sit down on the table and hash out a solution. Hard for me to see what that solution may be. The salmon advocates clearly want breaching. The dam advocates clearly don't want breaching. There's not really a lot in between. It's breach or no breach. So if someone comes up with something short of breaching that significantly, helps increase the survival of wild salmon and steelhead, maybe they have something to talk about.
This has gone on so long that I think folks in our area who have paid attention to it, maybe their eyes kind of glaze over a little bit when this subject comes up. How about for yourself? Do you still find it interesting to cover and to write about this? Or do you also kind of glaze over a little bit when these stories come up?
Well, I find the topic of Snake River salmon recovery very interesting. I mean, it's probably written about this subject more than any other subject across almost 3 decades now. Mm-hmm. The legal maneuverings, it's kind of getting deep in the weeds a little bit, kind of deja vu a little bit. A lot of the same arguments and a lot of the same players, and so yeah, it's the last few years, whatever you want to say about them, whether you're for the direction they were moving or against. It was sort of a new path, and that was interesting to write about. And now we're kind of back, it looks like anyway, into the same old argument that we've been in for 3 decades.
Well, I'm sure we'll get more chances to talk about it, Eric. Anything else about this subject we might want to mention today?
It's salmon fishing season as we speak. People are fishing mostly for hatchery raised steelhead and fall chinook and coho, although you can keep some wild fish out there depending on species and place. So just a reminder that that these fish are kind of beloved by a whole lot of folks, and it's a high stakes debate that's going on because the system of dams has certainly shaped this region and provided benefits for a lot of folks. People who use energy, people who want to get crops to market and such. So it's high stakes on both sides.
An important distinction, I think, to bring up, the hatchery programs that have come about have been successful, maybe even, would you call them wildly successful, or at least just successful?
I think successful is the right way to term it. Perhaps there's debate there. Generally speaking, the hatcheries exist to mitigate for the harm of the dams. So they're to provide fish to be caught in many instances, although there's a sort of wide spectrum of reasons for various hatchery programs. But the biggest is just to provide fish for people like me who enjoy fishing to catch. They weren't really designed to save wild fish or to replace wild fish. Now, in some instances, there are various hatcheries programs that are trying to boost wild populations. But yeah, they've largely been successful. Now there's 4 different species of Snake River salmon and steelhead protected by the Endangered Species Act. The success of those hatchery programs varies by species. We're generally able to fish for steelhead every year. There's been some years when that's not been the case or it's been severely restricted. Snake River fall chinook probably doing the best out of all 4 runs. Sockeye remain on kind of life support, really in the intensive care unit, and spring chinook they're hurting pretty badly too. The wild fish, we routinely have fishing seasons for hatchery fish, but the wild fish, there's a number of them that are really imperiled.
And that's where the impact has really been on the wild fish.
That's what it's all about, really.
Yeah.
That's what the litigation, the Endangered Species Act, is about. Keeping these wild fish going.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eric, thanks for your insight on this. Always good to chat with you. And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Lewiston Tribune Podcast. We'll be back again next week in the Junior Stockwell studio for another new episode. And until then, have a great day. Thanks.
See ya.